What's up, bass players? It's Jesse Wood. You are watching Jesse TV, and today we are talking about bass and sound with my good buddy Jeremy, an amazing sound engineer. So, are you ready? Let's talk bass. Thank you guys so much for tuning into the channel. This is my buddy Jeremy. He's right here. He's already in here. And of course,
up,
if
y'all?
you guys like the content at any point in this video, the goal of Let's Talk Bass is to share tips, tricks, successes, and screw-ups, but overall just bring value into and bring together the bass community. So if you like anything along the way, please be sure to hit that like button, hit subscribe so you don't miss any episodes. But Jeremy, good to see you, bro. Jeremy is an incredible guy. He wears many hats, although he's not wearing one today. He's a sound engineer. He's a bass player. He's a multi-instrumentalist. So all you need to know right now, while you're deciding if you're going to keep listening to us clowns, is that he knows what he's talking about. And I haven't figured it all out. I can just tell you I'm not dumb. So you might want to hang in and see where we go with this thing. See what comes up. There's a lot that bass and sound have to do together. And if any one of them suck, the whole thing's going to suck. So it doesn't take just like showing up to a gig and knowing all the lines and having your gear right. If the sound engineer needs help, then or the technology, the equipment where you're at is not good, life can really be miserable as a bass player. And honestly, a lot of the gear that I have and bring is because of a lot of bad experiences. And for some reason, Jeremy, here's my first question. All right. And maybe there's like a sound engineer code of ethics where you don't share insider things from sound engineers. But I have this theory that I postulated years ago, because every time I went to a gig, somehow there was one DI box that was kind of rickety and broken and would lose connection, either that or one shoddy XLR. And every time the one piece of questionable equipment was always used in the bass player's input line. Is that like the thing that sounded like, are we on a tier list that, okay, there's vocal and guitar and drummer and piano, and well, I got this one shoddy DI, we'll give it to the bass player because if it goes out, we're not really missing anything. So is that true?
I would say no, that is not true. But I will say this. First thing that comes to mind when you're saying that, bass is, y'all, buckle up, because I'm a nerd. I'm going to tell you a lot of information. So if you want information, this is the show. Bass relies so heavily on DI boxes, and I would say it's probably the most DI heavy instrument that comes through front of house. And I mean, yeah, you got acoustics that'll hit DIs, but a lot of time, more often than not, in my world, they're wireless, so you're not really hitting a DI box. So the only thing on stage that is pretty much necessarily DI is a bass guitar. So which one's going to get beat up?
Right.
Which DI is going to get beat up? The one that's plugging in bass, you know?
Let's pause for a second and let's un-nerd ourselves a little bit, because there may be guys in here watching this that you're just getting into bass. Maybe you're just playing in your room right now. You've got a sweet little combo. You got an Ibanez or a Squire, whatever it is. You're just trying to figure out that you want to play bass. And like, what are we talking about? What are these letters and words and numbers? Oftentimes other band members will joke me when I'm on stage and I'm communicating with sound guys, because I'm like, XLR, the input, the output, the DI, what do you need? I've got a 1/4 inch, need to go to 1/8 inch male. And band members are like, what are you even saying? But I'm just communicating with the sound engineer on what we need. So DI, what is a DI? First of all,
thank you for asking that question, Jesse. DIs, basically, So if you look at your instrument cable, it's got, I'm not going to pick one up. It's got a tip and then it's got a sleeve, right? It's just got 2 connections on it. But if you look at a microphone cable, it's got 3, right? It's got pins 1, 2, and 3. DIs basically take that 2 conductor signal and make it a 3 conductor signal. The function is I've all had the experience, if you've been playing for any amount of time, that you get like a noisy 1/4-inch cable and like you pick up a radio station or something. It happens. Tell me, Jesse, that happens.
Well, true. Fact.
Microphone cables, they don't do that because of technological nerdification. That's also a technical term.
Actually.
So if you're going to run a long run of cable, you want that on an XLR rather than an instrument cable. So obviously your bass is going to have an instrument out, a 1/4-inch out, but you need to get that one way or another into an XLR cable. And just a simple adapter doesn't do it. Having that box, it actually has a little transformer in there, which, oh gosh, we could talk about transformers all day long.
I got a Jensen in my JDI.
Yes, Jensen's.
Yes.
Love it. But that little box, whether it's doing it through an electronic circuit, whether it's doing it through tubes or transistors or a transformer, it turns your bass's 1/4-inch signal into an XLR signal, which then you can run, hundreds of feet without any practical loss.
Yeah.
Especially in a live setting.
Sound degradation, right?
Yes. High-end roll-off, it just gets muddy and unclear, and you lose clarity. Yeah.
Yeah. So, guys, whether you know it or not, there's a lot that goes into having you and what you're doing on your bass present and sound really well in the best quality. What's the worst is when I'm at a concert or a show or a worship service in church or something, and I'm just observing, I'm just in it to enjoy it, and I can't hear the bass, or there's something crazy going on, or there's noise. And the worst is when you can see the bassist like just killing it. And he's in his own world because he's got his 8x10 Ampeg stack, like blowing his hair off from the back. And he's like doing his thing, but I can't hear it out here, or it's so distorted or something. And so as bass players, we need to show up owning and being responsible for our end of it. Some things you can't control, but I have slowly started to, and pretty much now, control as much as I can control because of the bad experiences that I've had. And so basically this DI box, which is direct input, it's the way that you take your bass and everything that you've done to prepare and connect it with the sound guy. I've got my massive behemoth of a board. Oh, it's heavier than it looks. Maybe it is heavy as it looks. I don't know. Right here. Lots of things going on. But the DI, we won't talk about all this right now. The DI is cleverly hidden underneath the board. And that's a 3-pin XLR that Jeremy was referencing right there. What you can't see also in the guts of this thing is that, oh Jesus, this sounded better as an idea in my head than actually doing it. So here's the, let's see if I can do it this way. Whoa, little display here. All right, so here's the back side of that pedal you just saw. This is the 1/4-inch side, and it's coming from all wiring of the pedal board. But what you need to know is that when I take my 1/4-inch from my bass, it plugs into this pedal right here on this side. So it's taking the 1/4-inch, like what you guys know and love, and it finds its way over to this guy. And this is the DI box. This is the final thing in the pedal chain. It's the first thing that I got, and it's at the end of everything. Now, what's beautiful, if you guys, me and Jordan Wright, guest Jordan Wright, we were talking last Monday about the Sansamp, which we mentioned it functions as a DI. So there's amazing what we call preamp pedals that basically have a bunch of knobs on them like you would find on an amplifier. So it gives you the ability to control your tone as a bass player, but also does this function of creating that direct input the signal conversion to 3-pin XLR, which now sound guys, you can work with them. Yep. And here we are, Jeremy, we're working. We actually prepared for this show a little bit and came up with some really good topics and things. And there's so many good things here. We could probably talk for hours, but I do want to hit some of these things really from your point of view, Jeremy, as a sound engineer. What are some things that, as a sound engineer, I know you probably can't hit everything, but what do you want bass players to know? What do you think we need to understand, or at least know, so that we can come prepared, not just in knowledge, but in whatever, whether it's equipment or knowledge or understanding or communication? What do you got for me?
Gosh, I could talk all day on that one, but I will not. My gosh. So as a sound engineer, my job is a job, right? A lot of times, like, I feel like, and I mean, I do this professionally. I know what I'm talking about. I've got a lot of experience with a lot of different bands. So I know what I'm doing. Okay. Not every sound engineer you run into is going to have confidence and experience behind what they're doing. And that's why Jesse's saying you got to be on top of your stuff. You got to do everything you can do. But what I'm doing behind the board is I'm making everything gel, right? Because sometimes you get guitarists that, I mean, let's face it, bass is fun. And guitars have some low end in them too, and some guy on their guitar amp just turned up the low end, and so it's got the super bassy guitar sound. And I'm like, I kind of want to hear the bass guitar, so I need to take that out. But we're making everything gel, right? So it's important to me when I'm getting a sound in the console, I don't need from a bass player the sound of the record in that it sounds mastered and polished and has all this high end and all this low end. I need something I can work with and shape. Because you got to understand, when I get it in here, when I get it in my console, I'm going to have to shape it to work around everything else in the mix. And if you shape, like if you're, I do a lot of work in church. If you're playing in church and you're playing just like the record, because that's what a lot of churches do, don't necessarily give me the exact same bass sound that you heard in the recording beforehand. That's because good. Your guitar player is going to be playing with a different sound. Your keyboards player is going to be playing with a different sound. Your drummer is going to most definitely be using a different sound than was on the record. And if you give me the exact sound on the record and it's all compressed, it's equalized, blah, 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 you've done everything to it. It's this block of sound. It might sound incredible, but I'm at front of house thinking, I've got this problem here now because everything else is different except for this. And it sounds great, but I can't get it to fit. And, oh my gosh, this is super important. Bass players, listen up. If I cannot make your sound fit in the mix, it will be extremely hard to hear you. Like, you got a kick drum you're competing with. Yeah. Sometimes, like I said, you got some guitar amps that got some low end. And I mean, I don't want to, like, neuter the guitar sounds. You know, I don't want to take everything out just so I can hear the bass, because then the guitar sounds terrible too. I want everything to sound good, right? Yeah. That's what I'm up there doing. So I want a sound that's not extreme, right? So sometimes guys come and they got this crazy distorted thing and it's super aggressive and it's cool, but the problem is now I'm locked into a sound and I can't adjust that to fit with the kick drum and the guitars and the low ends of the synthesizers and stuff like that. Yeah, that makes a lot of sense. I need something that's middle of the road. It's not super scooped. It's not super mid-rangey, you know? I just need... It's like a 2x4. You know, if anyone's ever done, like, work with a 2x4, a 2x4 is... Well, some of them are twisted, but for the most part, let's say they're straight and you know what size you're going to get. Okay? That's what I need. I just need something that's straight up the middle, and it's something I can shape to work with everything else. I can turn that 2x4 into, you know, that acoustic treatment right there, made out of 2x4s. The apartment I'm sitting in right now, made out of 2x4s. That's what I need out of a bass sound in order to make you the best you can be in the context of the mix, right? That's good. That's good. That's really good. That's really good advice. And what I love about it too, and what the other thing is, when you're trying to do, let's say
cover bands, right? Whether it's in a church setting or anywhere else, and you're trying to emulate the sound. Sometimes, and in churches, this happens a lot, where you don't even have all of the same elements on stage. There can be less, or there can be just as many, but there's different ones. Like now you have a classically trained piano player who doesn't know how to play a pad, and they're like playing piano, and it's completely different elements entirely. And one thing that I love doing, I've trained and worked with worship teams in churches, is helping them take all of the pieces that they have and doing a song well without trying to feel like they have to exactly replicate. Because people, a song that you hear and love, you love it not because all of the pieces are exactly what you want. You love it because it works. Everything blends together. The music has movement. People are the instruments are in different bands of the frequency spectrum. They're not competing. It's mixed, mastered, and balanced beautifully. So when you think that doing a song well starts with exact copying everything, you're missing and you're eliminating part of the creative process. I've had better experiences with acoustic, me, and a drummer than sometimes trying to have two guitars, piano, acoustic, drums, and then everybody try to figure out how to smash into each other with our frequency and play style. Because sometimes less is more when what you're doing fits and it's good quality and it's easy and something that the sound engineer can really work with, instead of trying to figure out who do I need to see. When sound guys have to default to volume regulation to mix it, you're in trouble.
Yeah.
What essentially, Jeremy, what you were saying, if I don't have something to work with, it's going to be hard to hear you. So you're just stuck to a fader. Like, when can I try to turn you up? Okay, that's not working. You're trying to. I've literally watched sound engineers sweep the frequency spectrum or on an EQ, trying to find whatever it is that sucks to pull it out so we could try to get more volume. Because it's not about you can handle. This is true for all humans. You can handle louder volume when it's better quality and mixed.
Yes.
Louder volume doesn't equate to anything except as maybe perhaps a proof that you've got something that is pleasing to the ear, that when it hits you, it's not offensive. You can have somebody just banging on a keyboard by themselves at 40 decibels and want to cry, but be listening to a beautifully blended rock concert at 110 decibels and be living life, like loving it, which 110 is like over my max. I have like old man ears. I can't even do shows a lot of times because it's very difficult to find good mixes. Yeah. But Jeremy, let's go a little bit deeper on what you just said. I'm sure there's a lot of experienced bass players that are watching this and will come across this, and myself included. Give me some practical things. So if I've got a preamp, if I've got low, mid, and treble, and I want that classic SVT tone, like I do, there's a specific bass tone that I want, but I want the sound engineer to be happy. So give some practical tips on what can I do? What are my limits? Like I want drive, maybe I want some fuzz. I want to be me. I want to have my own style and my personality and all that stuff, but I don't want to handicap the sound engineer. So what kind of practical things or tips do you have, at least in the arenas that you have experience in? What do you think?
Yeah, that's good. Biggest, probably number one thing for me is EQ. Well, let me just say this, EQ and compression, right? Drive is, depending on what song you're playing, you got to serve the song, you got to serve the genre, right? If you're playing some metal song, oh my gosh, go crazy, do what it needs to do. If you're playing a jazz gig on a fretless, don't distort it, because that doesn't make sense.
That's just offensive.
Yes. You will get fired if you try to do that.
It's true.
Yes. So back here on front of house, I've got EQs and I've got compressors. So if you've got EQs and compressors too, which you do, it's really easy to overuse that. And the thing that's going to happen if you overcompress, and the reason you've got a third party as a sound engineer that's not playing an instrument mixing you is because he's got an objective opinion and he can hear what the rest of the audience is hearing. And in the end, you showed up on stage not to make yourself feel good, but you showed up on stage to play for an audience, right?
Right.
You hope and pray you got a good sound engineer, hire one if you don't. But you've got to trust that guy to do his job, because as a player, I'm guilty of this too when I'm playing, and it requires a lot of editing on my part of my own sounds. It's really easy to go over the top with anything, because you're playing and there's something about knowing exactly what note's going to happen that you can pick yourself out of the mix, whether it's a wedge or whether you're using in-ears or something. So relax the EQ and compression. And like when I'm playing bass, I don't use EQ at all. I just have my volume at 100 and my tone at 100. And sometimes I'll roll the tone back depending on the part of the song or whatever. Rarely do I even use a compressor. Again, I'm behind the console as much as I am on stage, so I kind of have a bit more of a concept of what it's like to mix. So I'll kind of mix myself just with my right hand, how hard I'm plucking or picking. But going back to EQ and compression, EQ, if it's left pretty much flat, you're not going to have much of a complaint from a sound guy. And this is kind of crazy. Like, if you bump up your low end, which, I mean, we're bass players, right? We want more bass in the
All
bass.
about that bass.
Oh, yes.
That bass.
But if you give your sound engineer something where you turned up the low end on something, a lot of times that's going to back him into a corner again, and then he's like, I can't work with this sound because it's already so shaped. Because when you put EQs on top of EQs, it gets interesting. And
it starts getting, you start making exponential adjustments instead of linear adjustments.
Yes. And if with compression, it's way easy to overcompress yourself, and it just gets muddy and lost. And there's so much that's not even about, it's easy to think about frequency response, like bass, treble, you know? It's easy to think about it like that. But there's so much happening in the middle, just the harmonics of it, the sound that makes a sound a sound. You know, we all look at these, I'm sure we've all seen pedal reviews, and someone uses the word like, oh, it's squishy, or it's crunchy, or it's aggressive, or it's mellow. It's like, all those things are words we use to try to understand a sound in general, when in the end, you can't really define a sound based on it has more lows, it has more highs. Because I've heard bass guitar sounds that have a lot of mid-range and a lot of high-end that work in the mix, and you feel the low end better. And I've also heard bass guitar sounds that have lots of low end, and it's not intelligible in the mix. So it didn't matter that you got all that low end because you don't fit right.
I think that's a really good point right there, because there's a spot in the frequency spectrum where that word you said was intelligible, where you shift from like audibly understanding and discerning something to feeling. And this is what I love about having a 5-string bass, is like you hit that low B and you're not hearing by itself anymore. You are feeling, like you hit that low D or low B or low C, and it's like, ooh, it's just, you just sucker punched everybody in the audience, and they walked away with like that stink face just stuck on them, like, oh, it's just so good. But I love that you bring that up, because what we want, and so as a bass player, I love knowing that's the effect, and being able to intelligently and creatively choose when those moments happen. And so having that available, but not overusing it. So this is where partnership with sound guys come into play. And guys, to be honest with you, I learned years and years ago that if you want to be a bass player that the audience loves, you need the sound guy to love you. And so I don't talk to people in the audience. I really don't. I will get off stage in a rehearsal or a sound check. You know where I go? I go straight to the soundboard. I'm like, what do you need from me? How is it? What's going on? Like really, what do you need from me? How am I sounding? I can and most sound guys, I think they're like, whatever, I'm good. Like, I don't need you. But I'll figure it out. I just cut all your stuff. You know what I mean? But like, no, really.
Muted you.
Yeah, but no, really. I have this kind of setup, or I'll communicate what I have and what I'm doing, and say, do you need less of this? Do you want more? Or are we good? Is it fine? And I'll even communicate ahead of time, because I know running my whole pedal board, its output. Here's what I found: its output is at a much higher overall gain than somebody just showing up plugging in a bass, even with an active preamp. And so I'll talk to the sound guy first. Look, I also have a whole pedal board that's not normal for a bass player. So I'll prep the sound guy. Hey, so I play through a pedal board. I've got compression. I've got EQ and some things on here. And it's going to come in hot. So you may want to either gain down or start at 0 and feel it, but let me know if I'm hitting in your sweet spot of what you can work with. And so actively engage your sound engineers, bass players. Can I say that? Actively engage your sound engineers. Don't just be that musician that goes on stage or not. Because again, if you want the audience to love you, you need the sound guy to love you. It really doesn't matter. If anybody else in the room loves you, except for the person who hired you or however you got the gig, yeah, they need to love you. But if the audience is raving, guess what? You'll probably get another gig. Your band will get another show, and life goes on. It's also good if you're in a band. Here's a suggestion I have for you. Find a good sound engineer and pay him to come with you everywhere you go. It's as important as having a great front man, because the sound guy is the gatekeeper to the audience.
Yes.
To how you sound.
Yes.
And how you come across. And quick plug, this video is not sponsored by Dark Glass Electronics, but this is my compression pedal. It's the Dark Glass Hyperluminal. What I love about this pedal, hopefully it'll focus here, is this right here, a blend knob. What this does is I can set all my settings and be like, yeah, I'm good. I think it's awesome. I'm in the studio, and the sound engineer in the studio is like, I love what you're sending. I don't have to do anything to it. But they do everything post in mixing and mastering. Live engineering is different. It's on the fly. Jeremy, I know sound engineers, they want to feel in control. Like you said, they want something to work with. And so one thing that I love about this pedal is that when I go in a live setting, it's very easy to just back this blend knob off if I need to pull less compression. If I feel like I'm losing some of my articulation on my end, because in the studio, it's so sterile. Most of the time I'm playing less. I'm by myself listening to the track of all the other things. You already know where you need to fit, how you need to sit. It's not this live juggling of all these elements. It's a almost predetermined. You can dial it in right there. And so it's great. But when you're live, it's different. So that's a whole other thing for you guys, bass players. If you're just doing mostly recording now, maybe you can really dial your sound in a little bit more, because you'll hear it in the mix, and you can rewind and play. You can cut and paste. You can change some things around. I learned a lot about my play style and technique and my tone when I first started going into the studio, because now you hear it all by itself, and you're almost like, man, do I suck? But you realize like string noise and slight latency just from you being an actual human, it's character, and in the mix it sounds great. But man, good stuff. There was something else I was gonna ask you.
I gotta jump off of something you said. Huge. You're talking about going and making friends with your sound engineer, right?
Yeah. Potentially bribing them.
Potentially, yes. Hey, what do you like at Starbucks? I'll get it DoorDashed to you right now. This is a real thing, and it's because sound engineers are humans too. If your sound engineer likes you, he will probably make you louder. Tastefully so if he's a good one.
All the way up.
Yeah, like there's a thing like when I'm mixing, I call it finding the energy of the mix. Sometimes like you got to push the guitars, and sometimes you got to push the bass. Sometimes it's the synth. And in the studio, I find a lot of times it's like I let my mix ride on a certain and if I like you, there's a better chance that that's going to be you. There. And you also mentioned like having that conversation with your bass player. Now, humility is huge as a musician, right? Like I don't care what you play.
Do musicians have humility? I don't know. We all know what we're doing, and we're all the best. Okay.
Exactly. Right. But being able to have that conversation with your sound engineer, and then follow up with action of, hey, do you need anything else from me? Would it help if I change something? I've got a couple drummers actually that I work with come to mind. I mean, we all know like the cymbals can just eat everybody alive, and we need to dig in, especially as bass players, like standing next to the drummer or whatever. You're like, oh.
A tsunami of shimmer, I call it. It's like...
Nice. Yes. So I was like, in live settings, like I talked to these drummers, and I was like, hey, can you just play those cymbals like they're glass? Like it'll do what I need them to do in the mix, but it just won't bleed into the vocal mics. It won't hurt people in the front row. You know, it won't cause the bad cringe face. And they just started hitting them like glass. It's just, and I mean, I got overhead mics. I can make them as loud as I need, but the problem is they were too loud when I muted the overhead mics. So
yeah, and when they're bleeding into everything else, now you're just, when you don't have control, life is horrible.
There is no unbleed knob.
Yeah,
on a sound console,
and you can't gate everything. Okay,
no, you can't. It's like I wish I had anti-suck knobs sometimes, but
yeah, then that's what I tell most of the musicians and people that I work with when we get on stage. Hey, you know what? I have one job for you today. It's don't suck. Yes. Just don't suck.
Because I can't fix that as an engineer. I can't fix that. So just wrapping up my point, if you are humble enough to be able to work with your sound engineer and trust him with your sound as that gatekeeper, like Jesse was talking about, I love that word, to say if he's like, it's too compressed or it's too bright or it's too distorted or whatever, sometimes you just got to trust him, because in your ears or in your wedge or coming out of your amp, it sounds killer. But if you've got a DI, if you've got like, you're not standing with your head right on your amp like that microphone is on it.
Right.
You've got to trust him. And sometimes your PA system is harsh. And all those bitey sounds that are going to just dig in and be awesome in the studio, like they're just not going to do anything but hurt people out live. So being able to say, okay, I'm not standing in the engineer's seat. He's not standing in my seat to go tweak my knobs for me, because that's rude. Like, don't do that. But trusting him and said, okay, you're saying it's a little bit too harsh, it's a little bit too bright. I'm going to knock it down a little bit and say, does that work for you, Because when you have that relational energy going back and forth, and your sound guy likes you, and he's like, wow, this guy actually believes in me to trust me with doing this job, because speaking as an engineer, and frankly, as a bass player too, sometimes it's thankless, and you just get walked on.
True.
If you show that respect to someone, it's going to be so much better. Everyone's going to enjoy it. Your sound guy is going to come out and hang with you after the show, and just house music's up and everyone's just chilling, exiting or whatever. You just made a friend, because let's face it, like life is bigger than music. I mean, music's great. Playing bass is great. I love it. But life is bigger than that. And you just made a connection with someone. Like, that's huge.
That's true. Especially if you're in a place that you're going to regularly visit or be involved in. And again, bass players, we're just one piece of this giant puzzle of creating an atmosphere and experience for people to join in on. And we want everybody to be enjoying it. Again, the worst is when there's a bunch of people in a room and the lights are killer and all the stuff is there and the sound just sucks. And it's either the PA equipment or the sound engineers having a hard time, or the instruments are making mistakes, the musicians are making mistakes. So we all have our role to play in this, but we all overlap. We all overlap. And so we've got to learn how to bond well and how to play well in the places where we overlap. And one of the other things that I had just had to nail down in my own head over time is that a lot of times, and I actually began to set my expectations this way when I go to places I've never been to do a gig. I'll ask the questions. Monitors on stage, are they wedge? Are they in-ear? What type of system? So I'm trying to get in my head already how to set my expectations. And I can get my hopes up if you're Aviom or P16s and there's pan capability. I'm like, okay, this might be good. The most recent one I did, of course, we've been in COVID-19 restrictions, so there hasn't been a lot of events, but we had a brief window where there was a slight relaxation. And I did a gig in Elizabeth City, North Carolina. It wasn't too far of a drive. Church I've never been before, but beautiful, amazing people that I love. And I was in a blended team. So the drummer I've played with before, the guitarist I've never met. One of the vocalists is like my boy. We always do stuff. The other vocalist, the girl, she's guest led worship with us a couple times. The piano player, I played with once or twice. So it's kind of this hybrid band. We're still trying to figure out how to fit together. And they're like, yeah, we got in-ear monitors. Okay, great. Where do I plug in? And he's like, oh, it's a wireless pack. That already actually let me down. I hate wireless in-ear monitors because if I turn left, wherever your fins are, I would drop out when my body gets in between the antenna and myself. But here's what really sucked, Jeremy. Nobody told me that, I'm trying to get the sound engineer. Hey, can you adjust this? I'm getting it close. It's all right. Guitar player comes in a little bit late. He had work or something. He plugs in, he gets going. And right when we start, the guitar is like so loud in my ear and I can't get anybody to attention or anything. And come to find out, the drummer and the guitar player and myself were all on the same in-ear monitor mix, which ouch. I know it doesn't make any sense at all. It doesn't make any sense. Yeah. And this is raw, guys. It's not like it. Yeah. So I had a headache from guitar. It was very good guitar. It was just very loud guitar. But my point is that there's a lot of times when your performance as a bass player, your level of energy and how you do it is that you get done. You cannot let your personal onstage experience affect that. And I know that's very difficult. I know when you have a crappy mix or you're on a wedge and all you hear is the vocals because for some reason they can never hear themselves.
Hey.
And
honest.
I'm right next to the cymbals and I don't have in-ears in, so that's raw. And you want me to MD or something, and so I'm throwing up gang signs of numbers, but the audience is enjoying it. That's the point I'm saying. Is it really comes down to is the audience enjoying what's going on. And just to get a little bit more practical, Jeremy, I don't know if you can see this. So this is let me try to get my face out of the way. This is my preamp.
Is that another dark glass?
It's a dark glass vintage ultra.
Nice.
So lots of knobs. It's got output volume. It's got master. There's a blend, which is a blend for the drive when it's engaged, so I have one tone that I play pretty much everything. I do have the drive engaged, that distortion pedal engaged all the time, but the blend, it's actually back quite a bit. I really just add it for a little bit of touch to cut through the mix. And then you can see the drive is not only is the drive back, but the blend is back as well. But the EQ is on the bottom. And I want to ask your opinion about this, and maybe I should have sent you a picture or something. So it's got low, low mid, high mid, and high with selectable frequencies for the low mid and the high mid.
Mm-hmm.
And basically I'll just, in case you can't see it. So the bass is at like 1 o'clock and the treble is at like 1 o'clock. Actually, let me look at this, and this will probably be easier if I just tell you. So I got bass at 1 o'clock, treble's probably like 1:30, 2 o'clock.
Okay.
With 12 being unity, of course. The low mid, I have it on the 1 kilohertz, and
wow, that's high for low mid. Okay.
I have it. It's where you adjust it. So I've got it on the 1 kilohertz, and I have it at like 1 o'clock, 1:30.
Mm-hmm.
So slightly boosted. On my high mids, it's actually just close to that. It's at 750, and I have it cut at like 11. What's your opinion? Honestly, you don't have like, this is just based on my ear.
Yeah,
if that
no,
made
I
any
mean that's the way to do it. Just it's hard to say based on like my knobs are pointed this way. Does that sound good? You got to do it by based on what sounds good, right? But one thing I do like about this is, I mean, you haven't varied, but 15 degrees of a 360-degree circle on any of them, which to me as an engineer means, okay, you're not, and it's so easy to do this on an EQ. You're not compensating for a bad sound somewhere else. You got to base that.
Oh, yeah.
If you don't like how your bass sounds when you plug it in,
and you
just
got
have everything off, sell it and get another bass.
Right. And I will say this to that. When I shape this, what you don't know is my bass plugged into it is completely flat.
Yeah.
So I'm not stacking EQs. And so bass players, let me say that to you, with Jeremy's knowledge and my experience and conversations with sound engineers as a witness, don't stack. So if you're going to do stuff on your preamp, get a good solid full range from your bass, which most of the time is going to be completely flat on your bass knob, flat on your mid, flat on your low, high, mid, whatever. If you've got stacked knobs, if you got 4 knobs, just go flat. Find that detent in the middle. And then on your pickup split, most of the time, that means 50-50, right in the middle. And if you want to be able to hit different tones on the fly, I recommend, this is a great pedal. I love it. It doesn't have presets. It only has distortion on or off or bypass. What I would recommend, and actually have a video review of, is the Sansamp Programmable DI. It has 3 buttons on it. So you have 3 presets. If you're trying to fly between different settings with different songs, get that pedal. And here's the thing too, what you have to understand is that a lot of times when you make EQ adjustments on your bass, when you make pickup changes on your bass, and you make adjustments on a pedal, you will have volume either loss or increase. Mm-hmm. That is a sound engineer's worst nightmare. One of the best things we can do as bass players is make sure the volume is consistent between all of your settings. Because now you're playing a song and it's great. Now you hit the solo and you want distortion, volume goes through the roof. Or when you click the fuzz, you lose all the low end and now you're just thin. And the sound guy's on the fly trying to figure out how to fill the space, but he can't really do anything but ride the fader because there's no way you can get in the console and just EQ that fast and then come back out. So you may have to have a conversation with the sound guy and say, hey, so I do ambient bass. So I'll tell sound guys, so I have bass tone and ambient tone. They'll say, give me bass. Boom, 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 boom. All right, good. Hold on. I have another setting. Let me show you what that is and tell me where this is. So then I have another pedal at the end. So my tones split off, A and B for ambient and bass, but they come back together, but not before coming through a summer with individual volume adjustment knobs, so that as I switch between the two, the volume is the same at my ambient. Now I can rotate between the setting between low volume and high volume, but I make that highest volume match the volume of my bass. Just pure bass. So I'm never gonna blow the front of house out of the water. I'm not gonna freak out the sound guy when I go to like max swell on ambient bass or something before I drop in. And so bass players, be good stewards of your sound and think about the sound engineer with your shaping. And what I've found, honestly, like Jeremy said, if with slight adjustments in the right places, you ought to be able to find a tone that you love. If not, you either have the wrong effect pedal or you need another bass. And if your bass by itself doesn't get you close, then you probably need to find something different. So, guys, comment in the comments below any questions that you have for Jeremy as a sound engineer. If you want advice on pedal settings, comment below. Let me know. Just any options or choices. Let's get the conversation going. The last thing we want is a lot of amazing, talented bass players in the world that sound engineers are frustrated to come in contact with.
Yeah.
So don't be that guy. Jeremy, any other tips? Here's what I need. I need a story.
Oh.
Tell me a story. I know we're 46 minutes. You guys have been hanging out with us. I need something good. Make me laugh. Make the people laugh.
Oh man, I talked about humility earlier.
Uh-huh.
I'm gonna exercise that right now.
Come on. Yeah.
I do a lot of work in a portable environment. Not an install venue. We roll in, we set up PA. And so I was doing a church in that context. Oh gosh, I don't even know how long ago. Doesn't matter. We roll in, we get sound check. We're doing 2 services. We did the first service, and I was like, something's wrong. Something is wrong here. Like, why doesn't this feel right to me? I'm like, and I mean, granted, it's a space that's not really designed for live sound, so it's kind of, the room itself is
a cafeteria.
Yeah. It was an auditorium that was designed for acoustic band concerts, so it's designed to resonate, which in live sound, I'm like,
you want a controlled environment.
Yeah, because I mean, I can make it resonate through the console. I can add reverb to whatever I need to. I don't need
that effects channel is everything.
Yes. So I go through the entire first service, and I was like, I don't know what the heck is wrong here. And then I look back, and one thing and bass players are gonna hate me for this. One thing I do in an environment like that is I always check the lines to make sure they're of the PA system, not of the input lines, the output lines. I check the output lines to make sure they're doing the right thing. Make sure I don't have the main left output plugged into the front fills. That's gonna cause problems. So before all this, before we even sound checked or anything, and I mean it was early, right? I go through and I mute everything. I mute all my outputs, and then I unmute them one by one and make sure, okay, yep, that's the front fills, that's the mains, that's the subs. I went through the entire service with the subs muted.
No.
I tell you, I was going to kick myself, and I was like, well, at least we got 2 services. I'll get one of them right. That would hurt.
No.
That would hurt right here. I was like, that was no one else's fault.
That's almost as bad as we did a portable setup for my church, and I wasn't playing bass. I was actually I'm a director of communications at my church, and so I was more worried about the live stream and recording and all of that stuff. And we're out in a field, and we set up in this field. We offload everything. There's actually so many things going on, and to be honest, even with our sound guys, because I've been in this game long enough and rubbed elbows with actual, like you, professional sound engineers who have traveled the world, I know a little bit, and I understand ins and outs, and at least basic of hooking up of things. Like the cable it's got to be plugged in, and it needs to go from here to here. At least that much. But there was so much going on that I had to task the stage setup. And these are floor wedges with inner monitors for the musicians, X32 setup with the Cat 5 snake. I mean, great, super efficient. We do this all the time. But rehearsal, I'm behind the console, and my singers are like, I can't hear. And they're on wedges. So I'm like, turn them up, and I got it down pat. I'm like, monitor left, sends on fader, like boom, 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 hits, I can't hear. I'm like, dude, I am past unity. I'm at like 12. Something is wrong, but we're coming down to like time to go live, and I'm like, where's my camera operator, whatever. And I'm just like, something is wrong. So I come out from around the console, I walk across the field to the stage. I hadn't even been over in that part yet. And I look, and guess what? The monitors are plugged in, but they're not even on. They weren't even switched on. So now I'm like, no, I back up. I send the sound guy. I said, can you go look at the monitors? He runs up there, realizes they're not on. He goes, they're not on. Let me back up by saying we're in the field. So everything is plugged into generators. Okay. So far, we're fine. Everything's going. We're pumping. He says, they're not on, and goes to flip it. And you ever have your whole life just flash before your eyes in one moment? Here's what I saw. I have every vocalist in both monitors gained so high. And I don't know what the capacity on these generators are. So either one, a monitor is going to explode, or the generator might pop. Guess what happened? Generator pops.
Yeah, it's the generator. Oh, man, that's rough.
So he flips it on, and then poof, everything goes down. And now every musician feels like they got to tell me that they can't hear anymore. And I'm like, I know. There's nothing happening right now. So we're trying to fish out other extension cables and reroute the generator so it can handle the load. I got to run to the console, reset the gain on all the vocalists, and then run back over to the generator and fire that puppy up and hope that it can handle it. It actually hit start time. And I'm walking away from the generator. It starts. I'm like, we're good. We got it. And this is what made me think of this story is that I'm walking past the sub, and I notice we don't have a wireless subwoofer.
Oh, God.
And there's no cables anywhere around the subwoofer. Where's the subwoofer cable? It's not even plugged in. So I'm like, the pastor started the service. I'm supposed to be on camera, but I'm digging for an XLR to hook up the subwoofer because what I'm not going to do is let this thing go without the sub on. Unlike you, who just let a whole service happen. Just let a whole service happen without the subwoofer. Because as a bass player, you know what? Either we have bass or we're not rolling. We're ride or die right here is what we're doing. It's bass or die.
In my defense, in that room, there's like this really big low-end buildup right around front of house. So with the subs off, it doesn't sound like the subs are off. Like you still get a lot of low, like whatever's still coming out of the mains, it's just wrapping around you, and it's really dark too. So it sounds like it doesn't sound like the subs are off.
But when
any other venue,
when you EQ, knowing that you have a subwoofer in mind, and then now you don't have one, you've got less of, probably what you could have had because you had that roll off or that transition point.
Yeah.
But anyways, Jeremy, thank you so much. We're gonna have to like really get into the weeds because I even want to pick your brain. Like I feel like, okay, what should I do on this pedal and just make sure I don't suck. I definitely don't want to suck. But guys, if you're tuning in, this is Jeremy, great sound engineer. Put questions you have for pedals, for mixing, any stories you have, let me know. If you want to be a guest on the show, let me know. Let Jeremy know how much you appreciate him. There's links in the description. You can connect with him on Facebook, on the Instagram. You can gram at each other like cool grams, like I don't know. I don't know where I'm going with that. But anyways, guys, we will see you in the next one. Keep up with that with what's happening. Jesse TV Bass. You can always clue in on what's going on, the latest upload. And yeah, you know, as always,
Slap that like button like Victor Wooten slaps some bass.